Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
People need to register with FEMA.
The process of hurricane recovery.
I think Scott's a guy that knows what characteristics he's looking for in a coach.
LSU search for the next Nick Saban.
They're having concerns related to the adverse reactions.
Addressing fears parents may have about vaccinating their kids.
We think we'll have close to double the number that we had last year.
Travel trends for this year's upcoming holiday season.
Hi, I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Moreau. We were once considered the COVID capital of the country, but now Louisiana is among the states with the fewest COVID hospitalizations. The total number of active cases is now below 500. Public health officials caution throughout the pandemic, though, there have been periods of low cases followed by spikes.
That is some really good news for our state, but we've also got more big news coming our way. Louisiana will receive more than $7 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that won passage over the weekend. The bill barely made it through the House, though, winning by just 22 votes. But only two Louisiana lawmakers, Senator Bill Cassidy and Congressman Troy Carter, cast their ballots in favor of it. Those billions will be invested in roads, bridges, and broadband, and more.
Yeah, lots more. And now to other news headlines from around our state.
Phillips 66 is shutting down its massive Alliance oil refinery in Belle Chasse. It flooded during Hurricane Ida, and the company says the extensive damage is too expensive to repair. The plan is to turn the refinery into a storage terminal. That news has Metro New Orleans leaders worried about the loss of one of its biggest employers. The company is looking at how many of its 900-plus employees would keep their jobs. A Tulane researcher will use a $50,000 grant to study how Ida's floods spread pollution, affecting groundwater and water systems. Samples will come from about 150 sites, and the work will happen quickly before some of that data is lost. The former sheriff of St. Tammany Parish is facing life in prison for sexually abusing boys. Jack Strain was convicted Monday on 4 counts of aggravated rape. The allegations included crimes that happened before and during his time as sheriff from 1996 to 2015, when he finally lost a re-election. He is also awaiting trial on federal corruption charges, a 16-count indictment accusing him of steering profits from a $1 million work release program to himself, family, and friends. He has pleaded not guilty to those charges. Northwestern State has chosen a new president who is making history as the campus's first black leader. The selection of Marcus Jones was unanimous. He's Northwestern's 20th president and has worked at the university for 23 years as a professor and executive. UL System President Jim Henderson says Jones is an authentic leader of character, integrity, and vision. Jones says Northwestern is home to me. Julia Hurricane Hawkins, the 105-year-old dynamo from Baton Rouge, set a new world and U.S. record again in the 100-meter race at the Louisiana Senior Games. There's no one in the world older than her currently competing. When I interviewed her 4 years ago, she'd already written a book about her life, which she calls wondrous.
The The holiday season is upon us. We are officially a couple weeks out from the busiest travel week of the year, and that is Thanksgiving. Last year, the pandemic drastically reduced the number of travelers. Airports in Louisiana were reporting record lows for passenger volume. But this year, things are looking up for some airports. Staff are expecting near pre-pandemic levels of air traffic as the state exits this fourth surge.
Last year, most air travel was restricted during the pandemic, but as vaccination rates increase and travel restrictions are lifted, more people are expected to travel during the holidays this year.
It's about time you flew BTR.
At the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport, Jim Caldwell, the spokesperson for the company, says he's expecting almost pre-pandemic passenger numbers.
We think we'll have close to double the number that we had last year. Of course, last year was impacted more by the pandemic than we are currently. And our seating capacity is up compared to last year, too.
2020 was not a good year for BTR. Only about 30,000 people were recorded, which was a significant drop from 2019. New Orleans also experienced a major dip in customers, along with the rest of the country. To recoup some of the profit lost, Caldwell says the company would need to be somewhere close to 2019 numbers, which was also a record-breaking year for travel. Except this time, BTR saw more customers than they'd seen for nearly a decade. The Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport saw about 70,000 passengers in 2019, while the Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport saw about 360,000. This year, Caldwell doesn't expect numbers to top 2019's record-breaking totals, but he does expect to get pretty close.
Last month, total volume was about 59,000. Which was 90% of September 2019 levels, but was double September 2020. So we're getting very close to reaching pre-pandemic levels. And one thing for us, 2019 passenger volume was a 10-year high for BTR. So if we get close to that level, we're doing really well.
But before we can get back to where we were before the pandemic, Caldwell says that we would need one specific traveler to make a comeback.
What we really need is business travel to return. That's kind of the missing component, particularly salespeople, technicians, consultants. They need to see people face to face. And if their competitors start doing it and they're not doing it, they'll feel they're at a competitive disadvantage. So I think you'll definitely start seeing more business travel.
The expected increase in this year's passenger volume isn't just unique to Louisiana. Travel is expected to increase nationwide. This year, AAA is expecting 53.4 million people to travel for the Thanksgiving holiday, which is up 13% from last year's numbers. Travel volume is now within 5% of pre-pandemic levels in 2019. This means that air travel is almost completely recovered from the 2020s. So if you plan on traveling this year, AAA recommends following all CDC guidelines and prepare for roads and airports to be noticeably more crowded.
AAA is also predicting that many people will be traveling by car this year. They expect about 48.3 million people will be traveling by car, despite increases in gas. So make sure you keep that in mind if you plan on traveling this year.
If Hurricane Ida got you like Hurricane Laura and all those others before and after, you know that getting help, it's not easy. But the government's answer to help is FEMA. And one of FEMA's media relations specialists, Nate Custer, is here now to give us some answers and hopefully in turn help you. Let me ask you one thing first. What is a misconception? What does FEMA not do?
FEMA is not going to make people whole again. They're not going to put them into a total recovery to where they were before a storm like Hurricane Ida. They're going to give them, in a case-by-case basis, some funding, if it's not covered by insurance, for emergency home repairs to try to make the home safe, secure, and functional, fix the utilities if there's holes in the walls or whatever. But then people are going to have to work sometimes with local relief organizations, with the community groups that will form up to try to get a permanent housing recovery. We can provide them temporary housing assistance in various forms during the period where they're trying to get a long-range program to get back on their feet.
And in Louisiana right now, after Ida, for example, what are some of those housing options? There are trailers, we know, but what else?
we have what's called transportable options. That would include trailers or mobile homes. That's a long-range thing to bring about. You've got to find sites for those, utilities. They've got to be consistent with the local zoning regulations. They're not going to be in a floodplain. We can't be putting trailers or mobile homes in and having high water affecting people again. So that's one option. We've had people in hotels. We still have about 4,700 families in over 800 hotels.
And these are not local necessarily.
They can be, they've gone out of state. They've gone to Texas, Little Rock, Jackson, Mississippi, because the housing market, as far as hotels after this struck, was so tight because you had people who evacuated and then you had the first responders coming in.
And you probably had people who were still in hotels and places from the previous year of storms, like Laura, for example. Say the storm is hit. What is the first thing someone has to do? What are the essentials that must be done to be directly in touch with FEMA to get what people need?
This is the word, Andre, that we have sometimes difficulty getting out because communications are down. People aren't watching TV, reading newspapers, on social media. People need to register with FEMA. If they had any kind of impact in any of the 25 parishes here in Louisiana from Hurricane Ida, register with FEMA. First thing to do, if you have insurance, call your insurance company, but then register with FEMA, because FEMA may be able to cover some of the losses you had if you turned out to be underinsured or you had a very high deductible. Once they register with FEMA, then they will get a call from a FEMA inspector to come out and make an appointment with them and look at just what happened to their home. It has to be their principal residence. We don't cover secondary or vacation homes. Okay. But we can look at, on a case-by-case basis, emergency home repairs, like I mentioned, and temporary housing assistance. That can be what we call direct lease, where people can lease an apartment or a home or whatever once they've gotten the okay from FEMA for them to live in temporarily while they get back on their feet, and FEMA will pay that expense. We have another program called direct housing lease and repair. That's where there may be some unused, maybe in disrepair, multifamily apartment complexes that FEMA will pay to have fixed up so that they're livable, and then we can move people into those units. Something else, though, interesting that happened is the governor's sheltering program. That's rather unique, where the state has taken the ball and has already brought in, I guess, dozens of travel trailers.
Yes, even more. Yeah.
FEMA's paying for those, but the state has a contractor, and they're making the arrangements while FEMA continues to work on a housing mission, which is long range because of these factors that I mentioned of where are you going to place these units.
Yeah, the one thing you mentioned is that vacation homes, a second home, that's not necessarily covered. So Grand Isle is a prime example of that. Louisiana all over has prime examples of that because a lot of the places hit would be not the primary home.
That's correct. So you have to establish that it is your primary home. And when you register, you can do that. The registration was extended another 30 days until November 29th. You can do it by phone or online, or there is a FEMA app. If you have a smartphone, you can use that to register.
Okay, what if you're denied a claim? You make a claim, it's denied. Where do you go then?
Don't be discouraged. That's not necessarily the end of the world. It may be just because of missing documents, or you haven't clearly established that you own the home and that you, as the owner, and your Social Security number match up. So you can appeal those FEMA decisions, and even you can question them, and maybe you'll get it overturned initially just because of the missing documents you can provide.
How long can that be? For example, a Hurricane Laura victim, can they still be trying to negotiate with FEMA perhaps? Even it's a year, 15 months later.
That could be, although the general timetable on that is 60 days from the letter you received from FEMA, which denied you a recovery grant.
FEMA does so much, and you guys are all over really covering Southeast Louisiana. I appreciate your help talking about this and trying to make something that's really complex make sense to us.
Much like we saw at the beginning of vaccine distribution, some parents are worried about giving their children the COVID vaccine. Specifically, parents are worried about the long-lasting effects the vaccination may have on their children. Dr. Renisha Ford, the Director of Pharmacy Services at Baton Rouge General Hospital, tells us what parents need to know before setting that doctor's appointment.
One of the most vulnerable groups for COVID-19 is now eligible for the vaccine. The CDC now recommends children aged 5 to 11 get their shots. At a press conference, President Joe Biden said the U.S. is well equipped to vaccinate all 28 million children in the country.
We've already secured enough vaccine supply for every single child in America ages 5 through 11. And weeks ago, we asked states and pharmacies to put together their detailed plan to start placing their orders for these specially formulated vaccines for young children.
But even with the recommendation from both the CDC and the White House, some parents are still struggling with the idea of vaccinating their young children. Dr. Renisha Ford, the Director of Pharmacy Services at Baton Rouge General, says the hesitancy we saw at the very beginning of vaccine distribution didn't go away. Parents are phoning in more concerns ahead of the vaccine rollout because their children are so young.
Parents are having this concerns as it relates to the long-term effects of the COVID vaccine. They're having concerns related to the adverse reactions, such as the nausea, the headaches, the fatigue, the muscle soreness, the site irritation at injection.
The side effects are a big concern for most people when it comes to getting vaccinated. Some worry that the shots may cause serious health conditions down the line. Ford says that the same concern was raised when 12-year-olds became eligible for the vaccine in the spring. Her clinic didn't see a rise in demand when the CDC recommended teenagers get the shot.
Even with 12-year-olds at Baton Rouge General, we did not see a huge uptick when the vaccines were available for those 12 years to 17 years of age. And so I don't think that we will see a huge uptick this time for the same reasons. I think it's that same hesitancy.
During clinical trials, Ford says that some participants did have some heart problems after taking the vaccine, but instances of that are extremely rare and shouldn't keep parents from vaccinating their children, especially since the fourth wave resulted in a surge of pediatric deaths nationwide during the summertime. From late June to mid-August, hospitalizations of children and teens were 10 times higher than previous waves. Now that we're out of the fourth surge in Louisiana, Ford says it's a critical time to get the shots before the major holidays coming up in the winter.
I believe it's almost like with the vaccine for the adults. You have those individuals or those parents like myself who have been waiting for the vaccine to be available to their children between the ages of 5 to 11. And as soon as it's available, you're ready to have your child vaccinated. Then you have those parents who are going to wait a while and see what happens and see the side effects, and then they'll have their children vaccinated. And then you have those who just have decided and are not going to change their minds about having their children vaccinated.
The CDC writes that the vaccine was 91% effective in the trials, with very mild symptoms for most participants. Anyone looking to get the vaccine for their child should ask their doctor if they have any questions.
So if you're one of those parents that's on the fence about getting your child vaccinated, make sure you talk it over with the doctor before making a decision.
That right there is the latest sample of this year's bizarre LSU football season. A game against Alabama, a game they should have won, actually. But right now, with 3 games left, the big story is who will the new coach be to replace Coach Ed Orgeron. And some insiders say it's Jimbo Fisher of Texas A&M 1, Mel Tucker of Michigan State 2. Our insider, Matt Moscona, from After Further Review and ESPN Radio, you're actually everywhere. What do you say about those top 2?
I think your insiders are probably just about on point. I think Scott Woodward's MO is that he's always going to go big game hunting, and Jimbo Fisher kind of fits that mold. But as we saw with the baseball search as well, if he doesn't land that big fish, he has a pretty high floor where he knows there's a guy that'll take the job. I think that's where Mel Tucker fits into this search.
Would it be a disappointment, though, if it was Mel Tucker, because it's not that biggest fish?
Maybe to some. I think there's an expectation when Scott Woodward was hired that he would make this hire, make a football hire at some point, and that he would swing for the upper deck, and that you'd land a Jimbo Fisher, a Dabo Swinney, someone along those, a Lincoln Riley. But I think what we've also learned with Scott Woodward is he deserves the benefit of the doubt. You know, the Jay Johnson baseball hire, not many people knew Jay Johnson's name when that search began. And so far, most people are thrilled. I think Scott's a guy that knows what characteristics he's looking for in a coach, and I think Mel Tucker probably fits that characteristic mold.
Is there any...
In 2016, Jimbo really was a smokescreen for Tom Herman. So you hear Lincoln Riley's name bubble up. He's an interesting candidate. There's been some talk about Dabo Swinney. And you never underestimate a guy like Jimmy Sexton, who's Mel Tucker's agent, who's Jimbo Fisher's agent, who's the agent of basically... Yes, he is everybody's agent. So when you have a guy that's cunning like that, who's also very close friends with Scott Woodward, you never know what type of back alley deal he might be trying to work for one of his candidates. It used to be in February. So 80% of high school recruits are going to sign in the middle of December. So if you're Scott Woodward, you want this done. LSU's going to play Texas A&M on November the 27th. I mean, that Sunday, Monday, you want this done.
You do.
It makes it very hard to wait for an NFL candidate potentially, or a candidate that would play into the playoff.
Exactly. And Michigan State, by all accounts, will not be going into the Final Four of college football. Texas A&M could be. You could also have a scenario where Coach O defeats Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, and then the LSU turns around and announces him as coach.
That would be...
If they beat them, they certainly wouldn't be a candidate for the SEC championship.
That would be a bizarre scenario if it played out that way. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Something to consider, though, if A&M gets a little help, if Auburn, for example, beats Alabama and Texas A&M wins out, A&M goes to the SEC championship game. In that scenario, it is nearly impossible to imagine Jimbo Fisher leaving Texas A&M. So LSU kind of has to scoreboard watch a little bit too.
All right, so tell us what we don't know. What's the latest thing you've heard from, say, the Alabama staff, perhaps, about this hire?
Oh, some of the conversations I've had with people at Alabama is they know the Saban tree very well. Remember, Mel Tucker was hired by Nick Saban 4 different times.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real concern at Alabama.
Coached here at LSU in 2000.
Absolutely. Right? If Mel Tucker ends up as the LSU head coach because of his ability to recruit, his maniacal work ethic. It sounds, when people describe him, almost Saban-esque, actually. So while the skins may not be on the wall from a head coaching standpoint with a guy like Mel Tucker, there are characteristics and traits there that paint him as a very good candidate for this job that could really succeed.
Highly successful assistant in the SEC, went to Colorado for a year, went to Michigan State, short-circuited by COVID. Yeah. That season was not so great. This season has been, though.
It's something that I would point out to anybody who's going to look at his head coaching record. Keep in mind the context of the jobs he inherited. And sometimes coaches have rough first seasons because they inherit very bad situations. How they turn them around is often the definition of that coach in his tenure. So as hard as it is to ignore the record as a whole, look at what he inherited. A very difficult situation. Mel Tucker got the Michigan State job a month before COVID and then didn't get to see his team for 8 months. So, and then had to coach a partial season. So 2020, you can almost wipe that slate clean and look at 2021. I think Mel Tucker's done a fantastic job.
How will LSU finish this year?
I do think they make a bowl game. I think they're going to beat Arkansas. I think they'll beat ULM. I think they'll lose to Texas A&M. So you want to know a really odd scenario. LSU hires a new coach, but Ed Orgeron coaches the bowl game. You're going to have the lame duck and the new guy in the building at the same time.
Been odd the whole time. It's been fun to watch, though, and I'm happy to have you in our corner so you can give us the inside scoop.
Always my pleasure.
You always have it. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We've wrapped up our digital first series, Safe Haven. You can watch all 8 episodes on YouTube. And to celebrate the series completion, I'd like to share one of my favorite episodes with you tonight. This one follows the story of the famous Dooky Chase restaurant in New Orleans.
It's hard to believe if I were to travel just 70 years ago, this little guide could potentially save my life. I'm Kara St. Cyr, and this is Safe Haven, Louisiana's Green Book. After segregation, very few Black-owned businesses in the Green Book survived. But in the Treme neighborhood of New Orleans, this family-run restaurant not only survived, it became nationally renowned. What started as a family-run sandwich shop and lottery outlet in 1941 was transformed into Dooky Chase's restaurant in 1946. by newlyweds Edgar Dookie Chase Jr. and Leah Chase. It was one of the few upscale dining establishments for African Americans. Today I have the honor of meeting Stella Reese Chase and Edgar Chase III. They're both the children of Leah and Dookie Chase.
Hey, Kara.
Nice to meet you. Stella Chase Reese.
Dookie Chase, welcome to Dookie's.
All right, we're happy to have you in our family's business.
I am happy to be here. So, you want to show me around?
Oh yeah, come right in.
What is y'all's signature dish here?
So the signature dish here is the gumbo. And there's a reason why it's the gumbo. Because Mrs. Chase, our mother, said that was over a bowl of gumbo that she and my family helped change the world.
And again, you can catch this series on our YouTube page. That's the link right there on your screen.
It is so good. You've done a great job educating us with that, I tell you what. Well, Monday night at 8 on LPB, you can watch this year's presentation of the Angel Award. It's presented to 9 everyday Louisianans doing extraordinary things for the children in our state.
LPB partners with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana in this broadcast. You can watch it right here. It will also live stream at lpb.org and on the LPB app.
And that's Monday night at 8. Well, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.